Hi, everyone. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So I have a bad news. None of the GI liver pathologists are available for today. So today we are just going to go through the liver Kurt's notes. From Wednesday onwards, we are going to have someone available. So just a second, please start the meeting. So unfortunately, I mean, we don't have anyone on top of us, but at least we know what we are doing, so we can just read. That's fine. 2774964. All right. So let's get started. If you have any questions in between or anything to add, does anyone of you has anyone of you done GI liver fellowship from the group right now?
I'm a Search Path Fellow, so I've rotated through, but I definitely can't say it's my expertise.
Right. Yeah. But I would say if maybe if you have any of your experiences, just chime in, just say something, and let's keep this more interactive rather than just reading. Let's keep it interactive. If any one of you have any questions as well, just let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. So, all right. So medical liver, we are starting with. Do you want to start with medical liver versus? It doesn't matter because today and tomorrow both we don't have anyone. So we can start with medical liver. All right. So steatosis, steatohepatitis. Steatosis, abnormal accumulation of fat within the hepatocytes. Steatohepatitis will be fat plus inflammation. Acidophil bodies and or ballooning, active lobular injury. All right. These are parts of the same disease process and both leads to fibrosis, but steatohepatitis leads to fibrosis faster, essentially a difference in grading activity. Portal infiltrates may be present, but are usually mild. If they are severe, consider additional diagnosis. So portal infiltrate should not be present in a usual steatosis or steatohepatitis. If present, they should be mild. They should be not moderate or severe. Balloon hepatocytes, they are enlarged such that they stand out with no fat and thin wispy cytoplasm, most often zone 3. Macrovesicular over here represents a change in lipid metabolism. So there are two, macro versus micro. Macro is change in the lipid metabolism, and predominant pattern, nucleus pushed to the side by usually a single medium to large size droplet, and okay to have small droplets mixed as well. For microvascular, usually represents mitochondrial injury. I'm muting everyone. Hi, Lakshmi.
Hi.
Hi. Tell me, have you done? So you did a search path fellowship, right?
Say it again one more time, please.
You did a search path fellowship too, right?
Yes, I did. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. And did you do a GI liver too?
Not the fellowship, but in a part of
Search path.
fellowship only we had
Yeah.
both sides of GI as well as liver. Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't have any GI liver expert today. So all we are going to do, we are going to discuss within ourselves, and we can take turns reading as well if you want. We can do that so that it's not, it's not very boring to just read.
Because very shortly within 5 minutes I'm going to get into my car. That's the only thing I was thinking.
No worries about it. Just keep it lively. That's what I have to say to everyone, because we don't have a GI liver pathologist here.
Sure.
So just keep it lively.
Sure.
All right. So macrovesicular, we were reading in the lipid metabolism, change in the lipid metabolism. There will be large size droplet, and small droplets can be mixed as well. For microvesicular is because of mitochondrial injury. Nucleus remains central with innumerable fine fat deposits. And innumerable fine fat deposits. You only use this term if this is a diffuse change. So unless there is a diffuse change of this, do not use microvascular. A focal change will not be called as microvascular. And so quantifying fat, amount of fat less than 5 to 33, 34 to 66, and more than 67. Less than 5 is normal, 5 to 33% is mild, 34 to 66% is moderate, and more than 67% is severe. Estimate of percent of cells with macrovesicular steatosis and average over the entire specimen. Report rounded to the nearest 10%. Often found in zone 3 first. All right. So fibrosis, fatty liver disease causes pericentral fibrosis first. So fatty liver disease will be more of pericellular and pericentral fibrosis, where the most fat is. And then it will go to portal and pericentral fibrosis. And then it will go to bridging fibrosis and cirrhosis. Once cirrhotic, there may be relatively little fat. I'm muting everyone. There is a background that's coming in here. So so basically pericellular first, then portal pericentral, and bridging cirrhosis. And in cirrhosis, there may be relatively little fat. So coming to alcoholic hepatitis. So alcoholic hepatitis, hepatocyte injury and inflammation resulting from chronic alcohol consumption. So AST to ALT ratio more than 2. That's an important thing. Microscopic, there will be steatosis. Findings that favor ethyl alcohol toxicity like hepatitis is more hepatocyte ballooning. So first ballooning, and then more neutrophilic lobular inflammation. Mallory-Denk bodies in those cells. So that red arrow, they have nicely shown the Mallory-Denk. Lobular cholestasis. So there will be more bile cholestasis and everything over here. And more diffuse pericellular fibrosis. So the 5 things that we read were ballooning, neutrophilic lobular inflammation, Mallory-Denk bodies, lobular cholestasis, and diffuse pericellular fibrosis. So Mallory-Denk bodies are ropey, pink cytoplasmic inclusions, ubiquitinated cytokeratins. Cells also lose expression of CK818. But histology can be identical to NASH. So yes, so non-alcoholic and alcoholic, they both are identical. And for the NASH, that's associated with metabolic syndrome. So those will be obesity, type 2 diabetes, dyslipidemia, and hypertension. For microscopy, there will be steatosis, ballooning, lobular limbs, and neutrophils. Exceptions in pediatric patients where inflammation is more portal, acidophil bodies, and pericellular fibrosis. So similar to what we saw, there will be steatosis and ballooning. There will be more of limbs and neutrophils both, and this will be more of lobular. So basically NASH is both the hepatitis as well as steatosis. And then there will be acidophil bodies and pericellular fibrosis again. And then sometimes adults have mild portal inflammation, mostly of lymphocytes. So that's that. Coming to the scoring system. So fibrosis, none, and then 1A is mild zone 3 sinusoidal fibrosis. And 1B is moderate zone 3 sinusoidal fibrosis. 1C is portal fibrosis only. And then 2 is zone 3 sinusoidal and portal fibrosis. And 3 is bridging fibrosis, and 4 is cirrhosis. All right, so
Can I add one point here, please?
yes, please. Yes, please. Yes, please. Please go ahead.
Okay, so distinction of this microvesicular and macrovesicular is very important, especially if the patient, if it is a transplant, pre-transplant liver biopsies. So that will be, I think for me, at least it was very difficult for many times. Like I used to tell microvesicular and then my attendings used to change it as macro. And I mean, there are at least a few times there will be an overlap. Like the changes will be actually microvesicular steatosis should have multiple lipid droplets, but then within the hepatocytes, but then the nucleus will be like still it is not it's not pushed to the side, so it will be still in the center. That is the microvesicular. Whereas in the macrovesicular, because it is as the name says, it is a large fat droplets, therefore the nucleus will be pushed to the side. It is almost like a signet ring, like you can even mistake for the signet ring cells. So that is the most important distinction. And as I said, that as Akanksha said already, like it is a 30 to 60 and more than 60% of hepatocyte involvement is mild, moderate, and severe. Then for the transplants, if it is less than 30% of macrovesicular steatosis, they can accept that liver for the transplant. But if it is more than 30% of macrovesicular, it is rejected. It's not suitable. But whereas in the microvesicular steatosis, it is any amount is not going to affect. So they can accept any amount of microvesicular steatosis is not a contraindication for the liver transplant donors if they have. So that's the one point I want to add.
Right, great. Thank you. Yeah, we'll have the donor. He has written the donor as well, the liver for. Yes, so that will come through, but that's great. Thank you. All right. So we were reading the NASH grading and staging. So NASH basically mild zone 3 sinusoidal fibrosis 1A, moderate zone 3 sinusoidal fibrosis 1B, just portal fibrosis 1C, and then zone 3 sinusoidal fibrosis and portal fibrosis is 2, and bridging fibrosis is 3, and cirrhosis is 4. And then coming to steatosis and lobular inflammation and hepatocyte ballooning. So steatosis, again, the same thing, less than 5, 5 to 33, 34 to 66, and more than 66. For lobular inflammation, 0 is none, and then less than 2 foci per 20x field is 1, 2 to 4 foci per 20x field is 2, and more than 4 foci per 20x field is 3. And then for hepatocyte ballooning, mild few is 1, and moderate to marked many is 2. All right, so that was NASH. So we know that Wilson's disease is ATP7B gene, copper transport protein, and that mutation will result in inability to excrete the copper in the bile, accumulate copper in the liver and other tissues. Variable presentation, so acute or chronic liver disease, there will be neurological psychiatric findings, hemolytic anemia, and casoflexion rents. So low ceruloplasmin, increased urine copper, AST, ALT more than 2.2. and alkphos and bilirubin, total bilirubin less than 4. For the micro, it can be variable. So there can be steatohepatitis. There can be Mallory-Denk bodies can be seen, glycogenated nuclei, and then can be having later chronic hepatitis. So when considering a diagnosis, send a block for copper quantification. So unless they give us some history, or maybe we have to dig whenever we have steatohepatitis 2. If we don't have obesity, diabetes, or alcoholism, then we can think of this one as well. And this one as well, the AST to ALT ratio is more than 2.2. And then there can be steatohepatitis and Mallory-Denk bodies here as well. So that's something we can remember. Okay. So TPN, again, variable steatohepatitis or cholestasis, depending on age. So in infants, there will be more of cholestasis in TPN. And in adults, there will be more of steatosis and steatohepatitis. Then coming to other causes of macrovesicular steatosis. So macro will be more of drugs. Those will be amiodarone, glucocorticoids, methotrexate, tamoxifen, other chemotherapeutic. Malnutrition will be macro, and hormone alterations, hypothyroidism, elevated cortisol, growth hormone deficiency, cystic fibrosis, lipodystrophies. So hormone alterations and malnutrition is macro. Coming to micro, so we read that it was mitochondrial damage, and they have a nice picture of micro here. And the micro typical Reye's syndrome, inborn errors of metabolism, drugs, toxins, acute fatty liver of pregnancy. So inborn errors of metabolism, fatty liver of pregnancy, and Reye's syndrome, those are some peculiar causes of microvesicular steatosis that we can remember. All right, so now coming to if the inflammation is in the portal crack and chronic inflammation. So what are the causes? Basically, basic differentials will be viral, autoimmune, and drug. So if we are getting a portal inflammation, the differentials become viral, autoimmune, and drug. So now if there is a chronic hepatitis C is first differential. So again, we don't need to read all of this. Newer medications, ledipasvir and sofosbuvir, they are highly effective. And silent, slow progressive disease over the decades and eventually cirrhosis and risk of HCC. So microscopic, variably dense portal lymphocytic infiltrates, periportal interface activity, and scattered lobular collections of inflammatory cells and acetophil bodies, and portal lymphoid aggregates, rare plasma cells allowed. So a plasma cell should not be high. It's not autoimmune. So the chronic portal lymphocytic infiltration, that is aggregates of lymphocytes with interface activity, may be scattered in the lobular as well, and acidophil bodies with rare or none plasma cells. So acute and chronic differentiation often used clinical definition. So if the elevated liver enzymes for more than 6 months, then it's chronic, that's clinically. There will be fibrosis indicating that there is a chronic damage. Diffuse moderate lobulitis means acute or acute on chronic. So if there is lobulitis, then that means there is some acute component in there. Stage viral hepatitis using Bat-Ludwig, Ishak, Shiver, and Metavir systems, fairly similar. Okay. They haven't given us those systems. So anyway, so next coming to chronic hepatitis B. So again, we are reading the differentials of chronic portal inflammatory infiltrates, lymphocytic infiltrates. So basically, chronic hepatitis B will be similar, portal chronic inflammatory infiltrate. There will be, I'm muting this background coming from someone. Yeah. And if you have questions, just don't raise your hands, just start talking, okay? So far, any questions, anything to add? Okay.
No.
Okay, good. So chronic hepatitis B. So it's similar. So we are reading the chronic inflammatory infiltrate in the portal. So basically it's another differential. There will be interface again. There can be lobular hepatitis again. Important is that there will be ground glass inclusions that will be present or sanded nuclei. So ground glass inclusions and sanded nuclei. So this one I think is a sanded nuclei. IHC, HBS infected, HBS AG is infected, HBC AG is actively replicating. So core antigen is actively replicating. And fibrosing cholestatic hepatitis B. So that's a different variant. Fibrosing cholestatic hepatitis B. So that has more progressive or worse outcome, worse disease, usually immunosuppressed stage post-transplant, extensive cholestasis, bile ductular reaction, hepatocyte swelling, and fibrosis. So cholestasis, bile ductular reaction, hepatocyte swelling, and fibrosis. Those are the fibrosing cholestatic. So the name suggests that there will be fibrosing fibrosis, cholestasis, extensive cholestatic. Okay. And then along with the bile ductular reaction. All right. Hepatitis B requires Hep B acute on chronic hepatitis. So Hep B has to be there because hepatitis D happens over Hep B.
Is there a stain for hepatitis B?
Is there a stain? I don't know. Isn't there a stain for a HBV stain? I thought there was one stain.
No, for
Does
D.
anyone?
For
B.
part.
Oh, D. No, I
D.
don't think so. There is no, I don't think there is a D stain.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so coming to autoimmune hepatitis, so autoimmune is definitely plasma cells. So interface with lymphoplasmacytic infiltration, that's the key point for autoimmune. So these are important. So elevated AST, ALT, female predominance, and anti-smooth muscle antibody, ANA, LKM1, and elevated IgG. And so dense portal infiltrates with marked interface activity with lymphocytes and plasma cells, lobular injury, and regenerative rosette formation, which I don't know what it is. Regenerative rosette formation. So autoimmune hepatitis. Regenerative rosettes pathology. So does anyone, okay, here is something. Does anyone know what, oh here, regenerating liver cell rosette. Plasma cells interface hepatitis. Okay. Does anyone know clearly like how does the regenerative rosette appears? Okay, let's see if we can find something. So severe portal inflammation, mainly composed of lymphocytes, interface hepatitis. We are all reading the yes. Interface hepatitis, several necroinflammatory foci, adjacent lobular parenchymal inflammation, cluster of plasma cells visible close to the portal tract. CD38 will help in the diagnosis. Ductular reaction, so the bile ducts will be proliferating around the inflamed portal tract. So that's another one. And several spotty foci of spotty necrosis, giving appearance of lobular disarray and spotty necrosis. And then centrilobular necroinflammatory inflammation in case of true acute AIH. Centrilobular necroinflammation. And this one. So typical hepatocyte rosette. Here is the hepatocyte rosette representing regenerative phenomena in heavily inflamed liver. So that's how the regenerative rosettes are going to look like.
Mhm.
And emperipolysis can be there as well. Okay, so this scoring is important. Let's quickly. No, this one is not. Okay, this what is giant cell transformation can be there as well in autoimmune hepatitis. So that's we read nicely. So coming back, dense portal infiltrates with marked interface activity, lymphocytes and plasma cells, lobular injury, and regenerative rosette formation. Can have overlap with PBC and Rubik, and so that's important. So that's the scoring that I was talking about. So, so maximum 2 points for the autoantibodies, and points will be given to everything. So ANA more than 1 is to or SMA more than 1 is to 40 is 1 point. ANA or SMA more than 1 is to 80 is 2 points. LKM more than 1 is to 40 is 2 points. SLA is if positive is 2 points. Then these are all the antibodies. Now coming to serum immunoglobulins. So more than 2 upper limit of normal IgG more than upper limit of normal is 1 point, and more than 1.1 times of upper limit of normal is 2 points. And then others, so that's our part. No evidence of hepatitis is disqualified, no AIH. Atypical for AIH is 0. Compatible with AIH is 1, and typical of AIH is 2. And then absence of viral hepatitis and viral serology all negative is, so viral serology should be all negative in order to call it autoimmune hepatitis as well. So that's again 2 points. And then, so based on those points, the scoring will be more than or equal to 6 is probable AIH, and more than or equal to 7 is definite AIH. So that's that.
Would you be able to explain the ratio of the cutoffs? Is that ratio of 1 to 40 of ANA to SMA, or what is it?
No.
Oh.
You know, the ANA positivity itself. So when you call the ANA antigen positive, the ANA positivity itself, it is counted as 1 is to 40 or more is called as ANA positive. So each of either ANA positive, so the positive will be more than or equal to 1 is to 40, or SMA, that's a different. So SMA would be different antibody. Now, SMA of more than 1 is to 40 or equal to 1 is to 40. Those are their cutoffs for those antibodies to be positive.
Okay, and that's something that is seen in the chart by serology that's ordered by the clinic.
Yes. So when you will see in the charts, that's how they are being reported as well. Okay. So when you will see in their charts, you will see them positive, and then they will explain as to how positive it is. And if it is 1 is to 40 versus if it is 1 is to 80 versus if it is 1 is to 160, as the ratio decreases, that is, if the 40 is less than 160, you know what I'm saying? So 1 is to 40 is less than 1 is to 160 or 120, whatever. So it will, the denominator will increase in case of increased antigen. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Sure. So, all right. So probable AIH is more than or equal to 6, and definite AIH is more than or equal to 7. Now histology. So typical is lymphoplasmacytic interface hepatitis extending into the lobule, regenerative rosette formation, and emperipolysis. So we saw all of these features in that paper as well. Coming to compatible, so those like these points that we have to in our report is basically typical of AIH, compatible with AIH, and atypical for AIH. So typical is regenerative rosette formation, emperipolysis, and LPL, lymphoplasmacytic infiltrate into the interface hepatitis. That's important, interface hepatitis, extending into the lobules. And then compatible is chronic hepatitis with lymphocytic infiltration without all features that are considered typical. So lymphocytic infiltration only and features of chronic hepatitis. And then atypical will be signs of other diagnosis, such as if there is a steatohepatitis or something else that contradicts, like that does not say that it is really neither interface nor lymphoplasmacytic, nothing, just steatohepatitis, definitely no. Then that's the AIH for us. Then coming to graft versus host disease. So usually post stem cell transplant, transplanted immunocompetent T cells attack. Someone has to add anything to AIH? It's a very important topic. Anything to add? Any questions? Okay. All right, so graft versus host disease, usually post stem cell transplant, transplanted immunocompetent T cells attack the new host and involves skin, liver, GIT. There will be rash and increased LFTs and diarrhea and vomiting. So basically what will happen is there will be bile duct epithelial injury. So these are the ducts that you see, and there will be lymphocytic inflammation in the ducts, withering and dropout of the drugs. Of the ducts as well. So that's the typical lymphocytic infiltrate. So basically, duct dropout, lymphocytic inflammation in the duct, withering of the duct, and then there can be mild portal inflammation, and possible endotheliitis can be present as well. All right, so that's your graft versus host disease. Then coming to rejection. So if a transplant is coming to us, there can be a T cell rejection, plasma cell rich rejection, and chronic rejection. T cell mediated rejection would be mainly formerly called as acute cellular rejection, and it will be portal tract inflammation mixed, like lymphocytic, including activative lymphocytes and eosinophils. And then there will be bile duct damage or inflammation and endotheliitis. So portal tract lymphoid infiltration or inflammation along with EOs can be present, bile duct damage or inflammation, and endotheliitis. Plasma cell rich rejection will be more of portal and or central plasma cell rich, and lymphocytic cholangitis can be there. Original disease must not be autoimmune hepatitis in order to call it plasma cell rich rejection for obvious reasons. And then chronic rejection. So chronic rejection, basically there will be bile duct injury, eventual loss or paucity of bile ducts, also often loose hepatic arterioles, chronic vascular damage with foam cell arteriopathy or luminal narrowing. So that's a very nice picture. Foam cell arteriopathy and luminal narrowing. Then coming to antibody mediated rejection. So antibody is more of smaller vessels. So basically portal vascular dilatation. So first thing is the portal vessels will be dilated, endothelial hypertrophy and arteritis. So that's a typical, often edematous portal tract and cholestasis. C4D, so that's important. I mean, C4D is also important in the kidney as well. This is what the C4D is showing in the kidney as well as the liver. There will be staining of the veins and capillaries in the C4D, and this more than 50% staining of the veins and capillaries. This kind of staining is pretty typical for antibody-mediated rejection. So again, so if you have the antibody, so cellular rejection, like the T cell mediated rejection, cellular rejection will always come with lymphocytic infiltrate. Antibody mediated rejection will always come with C4D and more of capillaries and veins being involved anywhere where it goes, like most of the places where it goes. So again, over here in the liver as well, you'll have the veins and capillaries that are involved with endothelial hypertrophy, arteritis, portal vascular dilatation, edema in the portal tract, cholestasis, and all that. And then the other thing is that there will be positive DSA, donor-specific antibodies. Coming to lobular injury. So lobular injury is always an acute process. Whenever you see lobular injury, it's an acute process. And if you have lobular injury, it is too injurious to be chronic. There will be very high transaminases on the clinical. Just a second. All right. So a lobular injury is always an acute process. So it could be featuring as lobular disarray. So there will be normal plate structure that will be disrupted. Lobulitis, that will be lymphs attacking the hepatocytes in the lobule. And acidophil bodies, so apoptotic hepatocytes, more of acidophilic bodies. All right, so coming to acute viral hepatitis. So viral hepatitis, usually hepatitis A and B, and hep A and E are spread by fecal-oral and vowels hit the bowel. Okay, vowels hit the bowel. Diagnosis confirmed with serology or serum PCR. So basically now we are going to, we are coming to the lobular injury. So they did the portal chronic inflammatory, like portal inflammation and portal chronic inflammatory infiltrate. And now we are going more towards lobular injury. So lobular is more of acute phenomena. It will be seen in all the acute things. So basically acute viral hepatitis, drug reaction, idiopathic neonatal hepatitis, all of these are your acute causes. So first acute causes is acute viral hepatitis A or B. But again, there will be lobular damage, disarray, diffuse lobular inflammation, hepatocyte ballooning or swelling, hepatocyte necrosis, regeneration. There will be mild portal and periportal. So basically the portal and periportal inflammation is not too big, it's mild, may see. And then there will be no fibrosis because it is more of acute. So again, lobular disarray and damage, diffuse lobular inflammation, hepatocyte ballooning, swelling, necrosis, regeneration, all those acute things. So that's that. And then drug reaction. So intrinsic versus idiosyncratic. So intrinsic is predictable, dose dependent, less inflammation, more necrosis. So intrinsic is less inflammation and more necrosis versus idiosyncratic is non-dose dependent and there will be more inflammation. So the herbal drugs, botanical drugs, and others that will cause the hepatotoxicity and can mimic autoimmune hepatitis as well. Now they are giving that link that I'm not going to details. So coming to idiopathic neonatal hepatitis, neonatal giant cell hepatitis. So neonatal jaundice with hepatomegaly, elevated total bilirubin and conjugated bilirubin, variable AST/ALT. Then diagnosis of exclusion must exclude biliary atresia and loose association with hypopituitarism. So again, there will be lobular disarray. However, there will be prominent giant cell transformation and absent to mild lobular inflammation and canalicular and hepatocellular cholestasis will be there and minimal portal changes and preserved bile ducts. So basically it is more of lobular and as the name suggests, idiopathic neonatal hepatitis is neonatal giant cell hepatitis and they will be having those giant cell transformation. No really lobular inflammation, no really minimal portal tract changes, preserved bile ducts. So really what is happening is cholestasis and giant cell transformation. So now cholestatic pattern. So we read about portal pattern, we read about lobular pattern like lobular injury, portal, and now we are going towards more of cholestatic or biliary pattern. So that's that. All right. So biliary pattern, the typical thing of biliary is this bile ductular reaction is very important. So this is something that you have to remember. So bile ductular reaction, what it means by that is that the portal tract, there will be more of these small ducts, the bile ducts that will be proliferating around the portal tracts. That is more of bile ductular reaction. So again, there will be portal tract edema, mixed inflammation with prominence of neutrophils. So that's important. So that's a large duct obstruction type of features by gallstones, stricture, tumor, and so forth. So edema, mixed inflammation with prominent neutrophils, bile ductular reaction, canalicular or ductular cholestasis. So again, ductular cholestasis. So basically the portal tracts, everything is happening in there. Cholestatic large duct obstruction is more of portal in there. So edema and neutrophils, bile ductal reaction, cholestasis, all of that will be happening over here. Additional considerations, lot of PMN in the duct epithelium or the lumen. Then consider ascending cholangitis. If there are a lot of PMN in the epithelium or in the lumen, consider ascending cholangitis. And can see bile ductal reaction with extensive necrosis or hepatitis as a part of regeneration. So look for lobular injury. So if you have lobular injury, then also think of that there can be acute phenomena like hepatitis going on. And if also there is extensive necrosis, then it is not really, might not be due to the cholestasis or just the large duct obstruction. The labs, importantly, there will be ALK phos, GGT, and serum bilirubin that will be raised. And the bile ducts, they can be highlighted by CK7 and CK19. So those are the two stains for bile ducts. Often see increased copper deposition in the periportal hepatocytes with cholestasis as well. So copper deposition can be increased as well. Then coming to the another one of, so we are reading the cholestatic pattern, right? So cholestasis or biliary pattern. So the second one for the cholestasis or biliary pattern is primary biliary cholangitis. So it is again autoimmune disease with destruction of the intrahepatic bile duct. So again, this is happening around the bile ducts. So it will be more of older women and positive AMA serology, M2 subtype. So microscopic, again, there will be portal chronic inflammation. However, there will be florid duct lesion. So florid duct lesion is lymphocytic cholangitis with bile duct injury and or granuloma. So that's typical of the primary biliary cholangitis. So lymphocytic cholangitis with bile duct injury. So bile duct will be, disarrayed and injured and everything. And there can be granulomas is typical, like the buzzword for primary biliary cholangitis. And often causes bile ductular reaction can also be there, and bile duct paucity can also be there. So either the bile ducts are causing bile ductular reaction, or they are just going extinct, and they are going like there will be paucity. So either of those can happen. So again, the florid duct reaction means lymphocytic cholangitis with bile duct injury and plus minus granulomas. And there will be moderate chronic portal inflammation. That's typical of primary biliary cholangitis. And then they are giving you AMA, look for AMA serology. All right. Primary sclerosing cholangitis, this typical onion skinning is very typical. And there will be fibrosis, stricture of the bile ducts, predominantly seen extrahepatic, but also intrahepatic. So stricture of the bile ducts and fibrosis of the bile ducts. So typical onion skinning type fibrosis and stricture of the bile ducts, often diagnosed by cholangiography. And there will be multiple strictures or bead-like appearance on the cholangiography, and increased risk of cholangiocarcinoma. Frequently young to middle-aged men, right? Young to middle-aged men, and associated with UC association with PSC. And then classically concentric fibrosis of the ducts. So onion skin, not often seen on the biopsy. So on the biopsy, you will see more of the fibrosis of around the duct, but the concentric fibrosis or onion skinning can be absent. However, biliary obstruction pattern will be again, so biliary, so it is again one of the biliary patterns. So there is edema, PMNs, ductular reaction, all of this can be present here as well. Eventual bile duct obliteration by fibrosis and with ductopenia. So bile duct obliteration eventually, and again, eventually ductopenia can happen. Then coming to another cholestatic pattern, so that's this biliary atresia. So biliary atresia, idiopathic prenatal destruction or fibrosis of the extrahepatic bile ducts, most common cause of pathologic infant jaundice. Usually present in first few weeks of life with jaundice and failure to thrive. Hepatobiliary scan demonstrates failure of excretion of radiotracer into the duodenum. Surgical intervention with Kasai procedure and or liver transplantation is required. Large bile duct obstruction findings are, so basically there will be large bile duct obstruction findings in the biliary atresia. So there will be non-specific and clinical radiographic correlation will be recommended. All right. All right, so. All right, so then next comes neonatal paucity of intrahepatic bile ducts. And these can be non-syndromic or syndromic. And syndromic can be Alagille syndrome that has JAG1 mutations associated with other abnormalities such as cardiac and skeletal. So for the neonatal paucity of intrahepatic bile ducts, there will be interlobular bile ducts will be absent in more than 50% of the portal tracts. Interlobular bile ducts are absent in more than 50% of the portal tracts. Can highlight with CK7. So that's the paucity of intrahepatic bile ducts. And ductal reaction may be present. Okay. Do you have any questions so far? Am I going too fast or too boring?
No,
this
the
is
piece
great.
is good.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Anything to add? Any in between?
This is kind of minor, but I guess in talking about the intralobular bile ducts absent and greater than 50%, it also comes like the adequacy of liver biopsies and keeping in mind that you have to have a certain amount. I believe it's 8 to 12, something like that. So when we're looking at the numbers, that's what we're looking at. And there's other factors that go into adequacy for the biopsy itself.
I see. Yeah, we'll after this, let's read the adequacy of the biopsy. That is something that comes most often to us. Okay. All right, so let's do the next. Sepsis. So sepsis, patients systemically ill, often sepsis, bacteremia, often jaundiced, and classically there will be ductular cholestasis. So ductular cholestasis is more of sepsis, and we can remember this picture. However, this is challenged by some as this seems to be a common in any condition with cholestasis, including during the hepatic dysfunction seen in sepsis. So ductular reaction with inspissated bile, flattened atrophic epithelium can be seen in sepsis. Drug reaction can cause any kind of pattern, but there can be more of bland or pure cholestatic pattern, or cholestatic hepatitis pattern, or prolonged cholestatic or ductopenia, and sclerosing duct injury. So the several patterns, pure cholestasis or bland cholestasis, there will be cholestasis with minimal inflammation. And cholestatic hepatitis, there will be cholestasis along with hepatitis, so inflammation and hepatocellular damage. Ductopenia, if more than 3 months, then prolonged cholestasis or ductopenia can happen. And sclerosing duct injury, fibrosis affecting the large bile ducts. So basically anything can happen in the drug reaction. Neonatal cholestatic diagnostic program, I don't want to read that. Sorry. Just too busy. All right. So now next pattern is the altered blood flow. So the altered blood flow is shock liver, congestive hepatopathy, sinusoidal obstruction syndrome, also called as veno-occlusive disease. All right. So these are the altered blood flow patterns: shock liver, congestive hepatopathy, and sinusoidal obstruction or veno-occlusive disease. So shock liver, liver hypoperfusion of any cause, massive elevation in AST and ALT, thousands. So it's a shock liver. There was massive elevation of AST and ALT. So microscopic, central coagulative necrosis in zone 3, and collapse of reticulin plates with no inflammation. Central coagulative necrosis and collapse of reticulin plates, and there is no inflammation. Other causes of bland central necrosis can be acetaminophen toxicity will cause central necrosis. So shock liver will look like acetaminophen. So look for acetaminophen history in case if you see this kind of central coagulative necrosis. Then next is congestive hepatopathy. So caused by hepatic venous outflow obstruction, can be due to right heart failure, Budd-Chiari, and grossly it will be nutmeg liver, and there will be central zone sinusoidal dilatation, congestion, hepatic plate atrophy, and necrosis. Chronic cases can lead to central vein and sinusoidal fibrosis and lead to cirrhosis. Excuse me. So sinusoidal dilatation, this we'll remember for congestive hepatopathy. Congestion, hepatic plate atrophy, necrosis, central vein and sinusoidal fibrosis, and cirrhosis. Sinusoidal obstruction syndrome, also called as veno-occlusive disease, so sinusoidal endothelial injury, often due to chemotherapy or stem cell transplantation. There will be central vein obstruction that will be best seen in trichrome. And then there will be sinusoidal dilatation or congestion, sinusoidal endothelial edema, central vein obliteration. All right, cirrhosis. So cirrhosis, now cirrhotic pattern. It's a common end-stage liver disorder, regenerative nodules surrounded by fibrosis. Special type is a biliary cirrhosis. So that's a different type of cirrhosis seen with long-standing cholestasis. And this one will be having more of cholestasis. So basically there will be ballooning, fatty degenerations at the edges of the nodules. The important point is that there will be jigsaw pattern of cirrhosis instead of the round nodules. So instead of the round nodule of cirrhosis, there will be more of jigsaw pattern in case of biliary type of cirrhosis. And then irregular nodules. So basically jigsaw and irregular nodules are typical for biliary cirrhosis. Copper deposition in the zone 1, and then ductopenia. Ductopenia is another important. And periductal fibrosis and bile infarcts. Periductal fibrosis and bile infarcts. So this is an important one, biliary cirrhosis, that we should remember. So again, the jigsaw pattern and irregular irregular nodules, and then ballooning, feathery degeneration, copper deposition in the zone 1, ductopenia, and periductal fibrosis, bile infarcts. So a lot of these things are very hard to ascertain. Miscellaneous, spelling of miscellaneous is wrong. Iron overload, also known as hemosiderosis. So with extensive transfusions of or iron supplementation, iron accumulates in the Kupffer cells or sinusoidal macrophages first. When those are saturated, then it is deposited in the hepatocytes. So first it will happen in the Kupffer cells, and then it will go into the hepatocytes. Sometimes they ask you where the iron is located in your pathologic exams. Then hereditary hemochromatosis. So basically inherited disorder of the iron metabolism, HFE gene mutation leads to increased iron absorption and storage. Iron accumulates first in the periportal hepatocytes, progressively involves all the zones and bile duct epithelium, and there will be relatively less Kupffer cell involvement. So the iron overload is starting from Kupffer cells, going to the hepatocyte. This one is going to the periportal hepatocyte first, and the Kupffer cells is usually not involved. All right. Glycogenic hepatopathy. So it's seen in poorly controlled diabetes. There will be abundant glycogen stores, hepatomegaly, and elevated LFT. The component of Mauriac syndrome with delayed puberty and Cushingoid features. So microscopic diffuse glycogenation of the hepatocytes will be demonstrated by PAS stain, which will be diastase sensitive, and there will be absence of inflammation. Glycogenation of the hepatocytes, glycogenic hepatopathy. Alpha-1 antitrypsin. So this PASD globules, we should remember with the alpha-1 antitrypsin. So basically, abnormal alpha-1 antitrypsin protein synthesis is phenotype of PIZZ accounts for most cases. So this is your board question. If you're sitting for boards, PIZZ is most common. And chronic liver disease and emphysema. And then microscopic, there will be eosinophilic EASD globules within the periportal hepatocytes are characteristic. Neonatal hepatitis features cholestasis and hepatocyte injury too early for globin formation. Then coming to resolving hepatitis, so can look almost normal. There can be minimal or low lobulitis or portal inflammation. There will be mild lobular disarray, some most disorganized traits can be there. There can be Kupffer cell hypertrophy. They are cleaning up the debris and highlighted by PSD stain. Most common causes acute self-limited viral infection or idiopathic drug reaction. Coming to adenovirus or herpes hepatitis. So massive bland or zonal necrosis with characteristic inclusion at the edge of the necrosis. Immunocompromised, poor prognosis. So we have this adenovirus inclusion. CMV hepatitis is neutrophilic microabscesses, classic. So inclusions can be subtle, but neutrophilic microabscesses can be seen in CMV. EBV hepatitis often looks like nondescript hepatitis with mild to moderate portal and lobular inflammation. So also keep in differential diagnosis, especially if young or immunocompromised. And so EBV is more of sinusoidal, lots of activated lymphocytes in the sinuses. Okay, almost like lymphoma. All right. Amyloid, so of course the apple green birefringence. Nodular degenerative hyperplasia. So cirrhotic-like nodules, but without fibrosis. That's your nodular degenerative hyperplasia. So multiple hyperplastic parenchymal nodules with normal to enlarged hepatocytes with intervening compressed or atrophied parenchyma. No significant fibrosis, best seen on reticulin stain. Results from changes in the hepatic blood flow from obliteration of small portal veins, leading to localized atrophy, and other areas grow to compensate. Can cause portal hypertension. So basically regenerative hyperplasia, nodular regenerative hyperplasia. Cirrhotic-like nodules without fibrosis. Congenital hepatic fibrosis. Embryonic ductal plate malformation leads to bridging fibrosis, cirrhosis with prominent malformed ducts. Ducts will be ectatic, anastomosing ducts, congenital hepatic fibrosis. Anastomosing, irregularly shaped, no significant inflammation. All right. Congenital hepatic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis. So cystic fibrosis, thick abnormal secretions present in the bile ducts. That's very important. So thick abnormal secretions present in the bile ducts, similar to lung and pancreas, will cause biliary obstruction, epithelial atrophy, bile ductal proliferation, inflammation, fibrosis, and leading to biliary cirrhosis. All right, the PSD will be positive in these. All right, thick abnormal secretions. Think of cystic fibrosis in the bile ducts. So acute and chronic lab correlation. So obviously the transaminitis is more of acute. So AST, ALT will be more than 5 times of normal. So over here, there will be mild transaminitis. So AST, ALT will be less than 5% of 5 times of normal. And then acute is more of those CMV, EBV, and adenoviruses. And also HAV, HEV are more of acute. And then HBV, there will be ground glass inclusions. AIH, there will be plasma cells, adverse drug reaction, and massive altered hepatic flow, so shock liver. These are all acute hepatitis. Chronic hepatitis is more of HBV, 5% will develop chronic hepatitis. AIH is more of chronic, so it's more of ANA, ASMA, elevated IgG, interface hepatitis, and lymphoplasmacytic infiltrate in the interface. So all of that. HCV will mostly develop chronic hepatitis. There will be nodular aggregates of lymphocytes. Hereditary hemochromatosis is mostly chronic, and HFE genetic mutation, elevated transferrin saturation, and serum ferritin. Wilson's is more of chronic. increased liver copper quantification, ATP7B gene, AST-ALT ratio of more than 2.2, alk-phos-T bilirubin less than 4. Alpha-1 antitrypsin, PIZZ is the most common. And then we saw the hyaline globules in the hepatocytes staining with PAS and dry-state stain. Alcohol, so again in alcohol as well as Wilson's, the AST to ALT ratio is more than 2. And more likely the alcohol will have the neutrophils and Mallory hyaline. NASH, diabetic and metabolic syndrome, obesity, and drug reaction. Then coming to the cholestatic hepatitis, so cholestatic will be more of alk-phos. So basically alk-phos will be elevated, GGT, and plus minus jaundice. So it is more of large duct obstruction. So in the cholestatic, PBC, PSC are the most ones. And so AMA, IgM is PBC, and then those granulomas, lymphocytic cholangitis, florid duct reaction lesion, all of that. And then PSC is more of fibrosis along the bile ducts, concentric, and the risk of cholangiocarcinoma will be seen in IBD males and can be diagnosed with cholangiography with those bead-like pattern of the fibrosis. And then eventually this will all lead to cirrhosis and liver failure and elevated INR, low albumin, and low platelets. All right, so differential diagnosis. This is more of your comments, I think. So if you have an acute liver failure and those patterns include lobulitis or just a second. Okay, so lobulitis or necrosis patterns, as they are too injurious to be chronic. So those will be acetaminophen toxicity, drug reaction, acute viral hepatitis, idiopathic. So if we have this kind of lobulitis or necrosis pattern, we can give this differential diagnosis over here, and rare causes being Wilson's, autoimmune, but PRA and non-hepatic viruses. Almost normal liver. So normal liver with elevated LFT is autoimmune, systemic autoimmune conditions, and vascular outflow obstruction, intermittent ischemia, metabolic syndrome, medication. With portal hypertension and or ascites is hepatoportal sclerosis, portal venopathy, and peritoneal cirrhosis. All right, fatty liver is more of either alcohol or non-alcoholic, and it could also be drug, Wilson, cystic fibrosis, and elevated cortisol. Bland lobular necrosis. So necrosis with little or no associated inflammation due to direct toxicity or injury. And those could be all the toxins and drugs that are affecting the various zones. Acetaminophen affects the zone 3. Granulomas, basically PBC is your granuloma one. Sarcoidosis, drugs can cause granuloma. Paraneoplastic, CVID, systemic granulomatous diseases. Bland lobular cholestasis. So lobular cholestasis without inflammation will be a drug effect, severe systemic illness or sepsis, and paraneoplastic syndrome. Ductopenia. So PBC can be ductopenia. Chronic obstruction can have ductopenia. Chronic rejection, GVHD, drug effect, and idiopathic. Chronic hepatitis pattern will be more of viral hepatitis, autoimmune hepatitis, or drug effect. Microvascular steatosis. So we read that it is more of Rye syndrome. That's first thing. Toxins is arsenic, acute fatty liver of pregnancy. These are your main culprits. And then the others include Alport syndrome, the others, acute foamy degeneration. Pediatric cholestatic disease is biliary atresia, extrahepatic, and then paucity of intrahepatic bile ducts. And neonatal giant cell hepatitis, we saw that. And then the others are sepsis, TPN, and the others. Cystic biliary malformation. So Caroli disease and others can have the cystic biliary malformations. PCOD, and then others. All right, then portal hypertension can be pre-hepatic, hepatic, and post-hepatic. And I'm not going into detail all of this vascular and veno-occlusive disease. So things that are easy to overlook. So congestive is Budd Chiari and right heart failure that we can remember at least. And things that are easy to overlook is glycogenopathy, alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, nodular regenerative hyperplasia, hepatoportal sclerosis, early bile duct loss, and amyloid and stellate cell hyperplasia. Okay, so this is the layman, non-GI pathologist discussion or no discussion of medical labor. But I promise we are going to bring more of a liver pathologists in here. Dr. Aki, he couldn't join today and tomorrow. He has some things, but he will come starting Wednesday, starting Thursday, actually, not Wednesday too, starting Thursday. And we are also trying to see if we can bring another like prominent liver pathologist, but she is coming later on, maybe in November. So let's see. Today we are done with this much, and we will be ending here. Tomorrow we are going to finish the liver tumors, pancreas tumors. Actually, yeah, tomorrow we will start from the frozen section evaluation. This whole thing, when we are fresh, we'll read this first, and then we'll go into anything else. Sounds like a plan?
Yes.
Sounds good.
What time tomorrow?
Tomorrow I'll try to be at 4 to 5, but I will let you know by 2 p.m. It will, like today, I had a lot of cases too, so I had to finish those cases, and I cannot just leave those cases and start doing this. So tomorrow I'll try to catch up too. Like I have a few couple of cases that I have left still, and I'll catch up with those cases, and then fast. I'll by the 2 I'll know that okay, I'm in control, and we can have it by 4.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Asta, whatever it is, I'm very jealous of your son. He's nicely playing video games over there.
Well, his video game is over, man. now his mom is free.
Yeah, I would rather do that than this. Oh God.
Well, I mean, priorities.
Yeah, I think we had our time. Our time is over. Oh,
Our time is over. He doesn't even get homework, dude. Like he's at the age that he doesn't even get homework.
those.
Right. All right then. Okay.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank-
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Thanks
very
so
much
much,
for
Akash.
joining. Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.